The C-SPAN networks bring you long-form public affairs programming from the nation's capital and are a public service of your television provider. C-SPAN, created by cable.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Leahy. Thank you, members of the subcommittee. My name is Bono. I'm the co-founder of the One campaign, and I'm just going to jump right into it because I've been told not to filibuster. And as you know, the Irish invented the filibuster. So I'm going to read this because that makes it faster. I've just returned from Africa and the Middle East, where I was lucky to join a Codel led by Senator Graham there. I visited Kenya, Jordan, and then with the team, Turkey and Egypt. This visit revealed one fact and two fictions. The fact is that aid can no longer be seen as charity, a nice thing to do when we can afford it. If there's one thing I would like you to take away from this testimony, it is that aid in 2016 is not charity, it is national security. And when it's structured properly with a hard focus on fighting corruption and improving governance to qualify for that aid, it could be the best bulwark we have against the violent extremism that is gaining traction in the Levant and the Sahel. The two fictions the expedition revealed to me were, number one, that this refugee problem is temporary. The typical crisis that creates refugees lasts 25 years. On our trip, Senator Graham and I heard the term permanent temporary solution thrown around, but without the irony that phrase requires. The second fiction is that it's simply a Middle Eastern problem. Refugees are flowing from all over the world, especially Africa, actually. Of the top 10 countries that are hosting refugees today, 5 of them are African. In Europe, the problem has moved from practical to existential. In 1989, the wall that divided Europe came down, a remarkable moment to live through. Who could imagine in 2016 another set of walls being built up, this time made of mesh and razor wire, but walls nevertheless. Members of the subcommittee, let me soberly suggest to you that the integration of Europe, the very idea of European unity, is at risk here. Europe is America's most important ally since the Second World War. Are we not your most important ally in the fight against violent extremism? This should really matter to you. I know it does. Put simply, as we Europeans have learned, if the Middle East catches fire, the flames jump any border controls. And if Africa fails, Europe cannot succeed. It's not rocket science. It's math. Here are the numbers. By 2050, the African population will have doubled to 2.5 billion, twice that of China. 40% of the world's youth will be African, which personally excites me because I have a sense of who they are and want to be. Of the One campaign's 7 million members, 3 million of them are African. We have a sense of their potential as an engine of growth that can roar. But we also fear that if the young people of Africa are misled and marginalized, their anger could be channeled not to hope, but to hate. A choice is stark. We fast-track our friendship, or we invite new enemies. I know that you in this room believe deeply that freedom is more powerful than fear, that hope is more contagious than hate. And I know you'll agree with me when I say that sometimes hope needs a bit of help. Well, this is one of those times. You see, to defeat bad ideas, you need better ideas. But the good news is we have them. UNHCR have great ideas on how humanitarian support can be done better and provide jobs and hope. They witness how the mood of a camp changes if there's a classroom built for kids. They see the despair in the faces of skilled workers not allowed access to the labor market. But soberly, I have to say to you, the international community, though it means well, is having a lot of meetings about the crisis. And I believe it's issuing a record number of press releases. But what it's not doing is cutting checks. As of last month, as you kind of about to hear, the UN's humanitarian response plans for 2016 had only received 9% of the funding they require. 9%. And grants are handed out annually, which is kind of on a hand-to-mouth basis with no predictability, which makes it impossible for these agencies to plan, which is madness. It's absolute madness. Another idea that I heard that might be of serious interest to this committee is to prioritize the support of the countries along the Sahel and the Levant who are not yet in crisis. Now, I know this sounds counterintuitive, but the people I met, especially the military, told us it is critical that these countries not only survive, but that they thrive. Imagine if the chaos that ripped through Syria were to engulf Egypt, or God forbid, Nigeria. These are gigantic countries. This is not melodrama. We now know that people, when running from war, will risk the most treacherous journeys. Doctors, teachers tying their children to their chests as they tie themselves to floating corks and tin cans on the Mediterranean Sea, all for the promise of a better life. When you think of an exodus on that big a scale, you realize that we better have some big ideas to meet the challenge. And we do, and I'm really encouraged to sit here and hear them come from a bipartisan committee. These countries need aid, but it's not just aid. Commerce is urgent here. New trade agreements are critical. Concessional loans from the World Bank are essential. Dr. Jim Kim and the World Bank are really being innovative here. So is Gail Smith, who runs USAID. You should be proud of these people. Anti-corruption campaigners in our own office around the corner in the One campaign will tell you that the reforms necessary to qualify for the loans can be as important as the loans themselves. The Africa Development Bank has been right out in front on this stuff. President Akin Adesina understands that corruption kills more people than AIDS, TB, and malaria combined. So tackling corruption has to be part of this package. In fact, he was also one of the first leaders to call for a modern Marshall Plan as a partnership for progress. So what might that mean? Well, the Marshall Plan, as America knows, was the first time the world witnessed development as security on a grand scale. The Marshall Plan was an idea big enough to meet the moment in history. It was an idea as big as the sacrifice Americans made in the fight for freedom, an idea that showed America could not only win the war, but the peace, as Lindsey Graham keeps reminding us. An idea big enough to change the world. An idea like the idea of America itself. You see, the peaceful Europe that I gratefully grew up in, the one that is so under threat right now, was born of the Marshall Plan. History's greatest example of national generosity as national security, which is what I'm talking about today. And I'm not alone. Trade and development as security. That's what Jim Jones is talking about today, and he's not alone. Senator Graham, not alone when he spoke to the Washington Post yesterday. It's the same thing. Finance Minister of Germany, Mr. Schäuble, not known for his wild pronouncements, has invoked this. King Abdullah of Jordan, the same. Actually, King Abdullah is worth thinking about because he's a leader who's also a military man. It's not coincidence that he's a military man because I'm sure, military leaders, at least the great ones, know the cost of failure will ultimately be borne by them, by the men and women they lead into battle and have to face as they come home. This is a new century. These are new threats. This is politically very hard. I hope I understand the challenges. I hope I understand the pressures you face as leaders. But in truth, I probably don't. But I'll tell you what I do understand. I understand that America is not ready to give up on its greatness. And I'm not either. That's what got America to the moon. That's the spirit that brought mankind back to Earth when you signed up to fight the largest health disaster in the history of the world, HIV/AIDS. There were members on this subcommittee who refused to accept that AIDS was a problem that couldn't be solved. And since 2002, we now have nearly 9 million people who owe their lives to the US taxpayer. If you're a US taxpayer, you're an AIDS activist. Think about that. I'm here today to testify to the United States Senate that I have seen the impossible made possible right here in these halls. And we need that leadership again in this moment of great jeopardy. It is who you are. It is your essence and your calling. And when you serve history, you serve the people of America. And when you write history, we all live it. Thank you very much.